What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm here today. It's actually a day off from practice, it would seem. There is no Dolphins practice today, and then they should be back, I believe, tomorrow and Saturday, and then I think we'll probably have Sunday off before they get ready to head to Chicago for their practices with them before our game, the first preseason game, which is super exciting. I'm so glad that is finally getting ready to come up. But I'm making this video today because there are a few topics that I actually would like to discuss, and as it turns out, I apparently have a free article from the Miami Herald, right? Because if you don't have a subscription with them, you get like 1 or 2 free articles a month. So I just so happen to have, apparently, because it's letting me read this article that I'm about to pull up for you. Let's go ahead and do that now. Oop, let's see. It's from Barry Jackson, as you can see, from the Miami Herald. And he's definitely, puts a positive spin on it. So, we'll see what he has to say. I mean, I read through most of it. So, I'm going to read through it here. And real quick, I went it's $16 a month, man. I didn't realize it was even that expensive. I mean, that doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot. I don't, unfortunately my finances only go but so far, and I can't exactly afford a $16 added onto my monthly expenses. So, I'll just, every now and again, when I get a free article from, Miami Herald, I'll try and find a good one so I can use it in a video. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to it, because there's a few different topics that he actually talks about in here that I'd like to discuss. So Jean-Pierre hopes to stabilize high turnover position on Dolphins staff, and personnel notes. He has quite a bit in here. A 6-pack of Miami Dolphins notes on a Thursday, the only day that the team isn't practicing this week. The new gatekeeper mentor for the Miami Dolphins offensive line might have the most challenging job of any assistant. And of course, he is referring to Lemuel Jean-Pierre, our offensive line coach. Elevating the play of 5 young players who could be starters: Austin Jackson, Rob Hunt, Liam Eichenberg, Michael Dieter, Solomon Kinley, and making sure the current backup center, Matt Skura, doesn't have a recurrence of his snapping issues that led to his benching in Baltimore last season. But Dolphins coach Brian Flores, who has cycled through offensive line coaches like some cycle through paper towels, believes Lemuel Jean-Pierre is up to the task. This is just a quote from Brian Flores. I think the world of Lem. He was here a year ago, and his energy in practice and his acumen about the game stand out. When you walk into his office and you ask a question, be ready for a dissertation and be ready to get educated on football. He continues, oftentimes I've got somewhere to go. I'll just put my head down and keep walking, or else Lem will grab me and ask me about this defense and this front and what happens. I'm going to do this if you do this. It's a back and forth, and he's that way with the players. He's got a great rapport with the players. We saw that last year, and I think he's going to do a heck of a job. So just real quick, cool. I hope all of that's true, especially because we need somebody to finally stabilize that offensive line position and get them to produce, develop these players, right? Now, I'm not convinced that they picked the right players to begin with. I'm not really sold on really anybody on this offensive line from a player evaluation or developmental standpoint. But let's see, man. I mean, it's going to be huge that this offensive line does stabilize for the success of this offense and for this season. Let's see. Flores has had 4 offensive line coaches in less than 3 seasons on the job. Not to mention, we are on our 4th/5th offensive coordinators right now. Let's see, with Godsey and Stoodsville. Pat Flaherty lasted only 4 days of training camp in 2019 before being dismissed. Real quick, let me add some context to that, though. Why was that? Okay? The reason why Pat Flaherty was fired was because he refused to put Michael Dieter and Shaq Calhoun into the lineup. They were 2 rookies. Obviously, Dieter was our 3rd round pick in 2019. And Shaq Calhoun, I believe, was an undrafted guy. Okay? Remember, that's our that 2019 was our tanking season. he got fired because he wouldn't insert 2 rookies into the lineup. So he gets fired. Then Dave DeGuglielmo took over in August of 2019, but wasn't retained after 1 season. In other words, he only lasted the 1 season, right? And then they did not keep him. He moved on. But to, continue what I was just saying, Dave DeGuglielmo did insert the rookies as per, instructed by his boss, head coach Brian Flores. And what happened? Well, if you remember during that season, and the reason why I'm pointing this out is because Brian Flores adopted the tanking philosophy in 2019, and by his own admission, he helped and had a say in every single roster move that was made. So not only did he help to dismantle the team to a point where they were fielding a lower quality product and were incapable of even being competitive against the rest of the NFL, not only did he do that, but there are multiple other ways in which he tried to put the team in position to fail. This is one of them, okay? Because throughout the season, what happened? Michael Dieter played like absolute trash, but he almost never came out of the game. I'm pretty sure he was there for like damn near every snap of the 2019 season. Even though he was absolute garbage, he was a turnstile, he was trash. However, Shaq Calhoun, the undrafted guy, was actually, now this is not to say that he was particularly good on the grand scale, but when you matched him up and relative to the rest of the offensive line, he actually turned out to be one of your better offensive linemen. But what happened with him? He kept ending up at various points in the season, on the inactives list, even though he was never on the injured list, and there was no indication, whether it be his play or an injury, that would be a reason for him going to the inactives list, right? So, look, a lot of people want to say Brian Flores on game day was trying to win. I completely disagree. Because not only did he do things like that, but we all remember those weird calls, especially the one in particular on defense, right? Against the Steelers where, they let up a big touchdown. Whatever. And there were multiple, but the way he used timeouts and whatever. So I'm sorry, I'm always going to push back on that narrative because, this is part of it. The reason why Pat Flaherty was fired was because he would not play or insert those rookies into the lineup. And that was only in training camp the little bit of time that they had, or no, I'm sorry, that was 2019. That was before 2020. So that was during training camp, right? It was a few days into training camp he fires him because he wouldn't put the rookies in the lineup. He wanted the rookies in the lineup because he knew at the very least they would make rookie mistakes and so on and so forth. And he was adopting the tanking philosophy. So, his personnel usage, his play calling, his usage of timeouts and challenges, just across the board, he was trying to put the team in position to lose so they could get the high pick. Anyway, let's continue on. I digress from that, and let's move on to this. Steve Marshall was hired on the recommendation of Chan Gailey and coached the group last season, but was dismissed after 1 season, a few weeks after Gailey left the organization. Which is no shock there, but as we know, we are now on our 4th offensive line coach. Jean-Pierre has the best chance to be a long-term solution. We'll see about that. I mean, he has to prove that he can develop these guys, and these guys have to produce on the field. If that doesn't happen, well then, you never know, right? So, but look, frankly, he lists some reasons why he feels, but none of this, the only thing that matters, the only thing that's relevant is what his unit produces on the field this season. Right? So that's the only thing that's going to matter. The history he has, right? Because we've seen coaches time and time again who have long track records and great pedigrees go to a different organization, not have the same success, and then get fired, right? So the only thing that matters is what you put out on the field, the product that you put out. So he played in the league, primarily center, as a backup for the Seattle Seahawks in 2010 through 2015, then became a coach as an offensive assistant for Seahawks coach Pete Carroll in 2017. Raiders coach John Gruden hired him as an assistant offensive line coach in April 2018, and Flores hired him for that same job in February of 2020. So that's his resume. Right. So now, those things and the things about, that Flores said about him, that he's, got a rapport with the players and stuff. All of that stuff could certainly help him have success. But we have to wait and see. And if he doesn't have success, if that offensive line doesn't have success, then none of this other stuff matters. Right. So anyway, foremost, his players know I look for the toughness, being disciplined, being detailed, and nasty, Jean-Pierre said. Well, we like to hear that, so let's see it on the field. I've got a good group. Of course he's going to say that, but I would beg to differ. They will push each other in terms of quizzing each other and asking those questions and understanding the terms of the O-line room in general. That's good. Obviously, you do want to see good study habits out of them. But again, it has to translate, right? That's a start. It's impossible to know whether left tackle Jackson will take the jump from adequate to very good in year 2. I'm skeptical. You know that. Whether Hunt will become the Pro Bowl right guard that some Dolphins people expect. I think if we go with, if we go with the lineup that we have right now, with Jackson being at left tackle, Eichenberg at left guard, Dieter at center, Hunt at right guard, and Jesse Davis at right tackle, I think Robert Hunt will likely be your best offensive lineman in that lineup. I think he will probably at right guard. Whether he's, good or great will remain to be seen, but much like Shaq Calhoun was the best offensive lineman on that shitty 2019 offensive line, I think almost regardless, Robert Hunt's probably going to be one of your best offensive linemen on the offensive line for 2021. So let's see. Where was I? Whether Eichenberg can become an effective left guard after moving over from right tackle last weekend. Yeah. What do you say about that? They reached, right? They moved up to get him when they could have done so many things different. They could have gotten Penei Sewell, Tevin Jenkins, Creed Humphrey, Quinn Miners. They could have gotten so many different offensive linemen in the same spots if they would have just done things differently, right? And, but they picked, so they reach, they give away that draft capital, they move up to get him to play right tackle, and now he's been moved to left guard. Apparently because he's not, I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see how it all pans out. We still have a few weeks to go. We still have 3 preseason games. So let's see how, but that's not, as of right now, that's not a good sign for Eichenberg and his transition to the NFL and so on and so forth. So let's see. And whether Kinley, currently buried on the depth chart, can rise up it again. And of course, we know that Kinley is now, dropped all the way to third team, second and third team. So, look, I've told people my first concern through training camp to this point is injuries / COVID. Although we do have some positive news on that front, which we will get to. And then secondly is the offensive line. And third is the secondary minus Howard, which we will also talk about a little bit here. This is probably going to be a little bit of a lengthy video, but I will try and move through it as quickly as possible. Eichenberg has looked decent since his move to guard. I've heard otherwise, but, Barry Jackson is going to give you the, slightly homerish and optimistic take on it. So take it for what you will. But, I've heard some other things. Let's see. Jackson has had solid camps so far. Okay, Hunt's transition from right tackle to right guard has gone smoothly, but we're only 2 days into padded practices. Jesse Davis, who has been working as the first team right tackle since last weekend, is in a unique position of having played with Jean-Pierre. Real quick too, actually, you know what? I'm gonna find it, because there was a tweet yesterday. I was on, so when I refer to, you know, I've heard otherwise, part of what I'm talking about is you know, I watch obviously several of the other Dolphins YouTubers. I read as many of these articles and stuff, and I follow on Twitter and the streams and whatever, and you know, so we talked about it yesterday on Reason's show. When I was on Reason's show during the open panel portion, I had mentioned in there about Omar Kelly tweeting out some stuff about the offensive line, and you can go back and watch his show yesterday and see how that conversation went. And you know, whatever you think about Omar Kelly, I respect him because he is, you know, a straight shooter, and he does say it how he sees it. You know, he doesn't try and sugarcoat things. He just tries to give it to you factually. Even though my frustration with it is he will have opinions that are contradictory, but you know, whatever, as long as he's just giving the facts and trying to keep it straight, which he does, I respect him for it. So, and to be fair, his area of expertise, let's see, you can see I pulled it up right here. The area of expertise is the offensive line. So this is what he had to say. Austin Jackson was struggling with Van Ginkel, no disrespect, but ... Liam Eichenberg looks green at left guard. He isn't on Eric Flowers level yet. Too early on Dieter. Robert Hunt has done well. I like the move. Jesse Davis's knee issues, which limit him to half a practice, worry me. So there's just a different perspective for you on the offensive line as opposed to the slightly more optimistic view from Barry Jackson here. Anyway, so let's continue on because there is a lot more to this. I previously played with him in Seattle, Davis said. I played with him and sat next to him in the room. We're good friends. Obviously, he's my boss, so I treat him with that respect. He doesn't want to yell at you. His individual drills are fast and competitive, and he wants to make it hard on you during that period. He's a good coach. Jean-Pierre has the chance for the long-term success and traction here that was elusive for the three men who preceded him. Again, that remains to be seen. The only thing that matters in that equation is whether or not he can get that unit to produce, right? And actually provide running lanes and give Tua time to throw the ball, etc., etc. Dolphins are listening when okay, so now we're going to move into some Xavien Howard conversation. And I'm just going to say it right now. Right, because Brian Flores has said that things are moving in the right direction, and now there are some reports out today that the Dolphins are quote-unquote unlikely to move on from Howard, and quote, why would they? You know, so, and I get it. Why, you know, for, you know, both from the contract standpoint of they have him on, you know, signed to a contract for a few more years, and why would they? Because they need him so badly. I get that stuff, okay? But until Howard is back on the field and practicing with the team at full capacity, I'm going to take that shit with a very large grain of salt. You know, and especially too because when it comes to Flores in particular, on numerous occasions he's proven to be a liar. So I don't really have any reason to trust him. If I'm keeping it real, you know, a lot of people might get mad at me about that, but sorry, not sorry. Because if somebody lies to me, well, I'm not going to believe them going forward. If they prove to be a liar, I have no reason to believe them until they can prove it. So, you know, until Howard is back on the field, healthy, right, and practicing at full capacity with the team and not just doing like, you know, an individual drill here and there, I'm not going to believe it. That's going to be the sign to me that says, okay, they actually have gotten something done or are about to. You know, obviously, if there are reports that get put out that a deal was struck and now, you know, okay, that's probably about as definitive as it gets. But then Xavien Howard is going to be back out to practice. That would then be the next logical step in that, you know, if that's the order of events, you know, in which they happen. So, you know, like I said, that's how I feel about it going into this conversation from this point. So let's see what Barry Jackson has to say. The Dolphins are listening when teams call them about Xavien Howard, and several have. But to this point, the Dolphins want far more than what teams are willing to offer for the Pro Bowl cornerback. All-pro cornerback, really, who has requested a trade. A team source called it unlikely that Howard would be traded. And quote, "Why would we?" the person said, noting the 4 years left on his contract. Okay, and that's true, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And that doesn't mean that there is actual progress. And look, again, man, because if we get to the preseason and Howard doesn't, play in any preseason games, or let's say that we get to the preseason and they still haven't agreed to anything and there really hasn't been any progress, right? They haven't agreed to terms, or they're not imminently going to agree to terms, or they have not traded him yet, right? If those two things have not happened, look, I gotta keep it real, man, because I said that I've been on Xavien Howard's side this whole time. I think what he should do is he should keep the injury going, right? And because he needs to do what's right by him. As much as I hate that for the team, but they put themselves in this situation, so they're not going to get any fucking tears from me, okay? So, he needs to take care of himself. The Dolphins just need to fucking give him that $4 million or guarantee his contract next year and stop being douchebags. It's that fucking simple. It's really that fucking simple. So, they need to fucking stop. And Howard said it. It's all on them. So they need to do it. They need to get it fucking fixed. But if they don't trade him, or if they don't give him something that he likes, who's to say he's not going to sit out of the preseason with an injury? And if he makes it to the season, bro, if he does the Jalen Ramsey and he's just out with an injury, he's still going to get paid, at least for this year. It will change from next year, from my understanding of how his contract is. It won't be the case, but he will still get paid this year. So he could literally Jalen Ramsey his way through the entire season, and that would be absolutely detrimental to the Dolphins. That would be the worst case scenario for the Dolphins, because then they don't get him on the field and their defense could suffer for it tremendously. They still have to pay him, along the injury terms in his contract, right? But he will get paid this season. Jeremy Klump had talked about it on Reason's show because of how his contract is structured, so that they won't get his production on the field. They'll still have to pay him, and then his trade value will diminish, because then he will end up being a year older, etc., etc. So, anyway, so let's continue on. But nobody can rule it out, because it's impossible to say if, number one, a playoff contender will lose a cornerback to injury and offer multiple high draft picks for Howard, or two, if Howard becomes disruptive, which hasn't happened to this point. I would say I wouldn't agree with that, actually. Not at all, especially when you look at the way that the secondary has done through camp. They've had their moments for sure, and they've gotten, a few interceptions. That's true, but they're not exactly, shining out there. And they're certainly having their fair share of struggles. And particularly Noah is having a really bad camp. So, it doesn't count yet, right? It's not the regular season, but as Howard said, you'll know what you don't know what you got until you're missing it. So I don't see it to be an impossibility that Howard would sit throughout the season with an injury. I hope that doesn't happen, because I hope that, they figure it out. But if he does, I am not going to fault him in the slightest, because he's doing what he has to do. And if they're just not going to budge, and if they're not going to give him the respect of either agreeing to some kind of terms in his contract or trading him, if they're just going to play this stupid fucking game well then they deserve whatever they get. Because they're playing these stupid fucking games. And they can't even do something as simple as bring $4 million up from the back end of his contract to now, or to guarantee his contract for next year. No, the Dolphins get no fucking sympathy from me. Not a single fucking shred of it. And so I do think that in training camp, they are feeling the impact of not having him out there, but they're really going to feel it when the preseason comes. So look, I mean, and to be fair, that'll be a major indicator in how this is going as well, right? If Howard sits out of practice from now until our first preseason game and then doesn't play in the preseason game 1, that's a pretty big indicator on whether or not there has been any actual progress or moving in the right direction. All right, let me move on. Howard hasn't caused any issues with teammates. And before I actually get into some of these quotes, why would he? Because it's not a war between Howard and his teammates. A lot of people are trying to paint this image as if, you know, they're warring with each other. No, dude. Like, you know, people want to try and create, some people in the media have tried to create a beef between, you know, Xavien Howard and Byron Jones. Because, you know, Xavien Howard mentioned the fact that he's getting paid less than Byron Jones, even though he's clearly the better player. That's why I actually gained a lot of respect for Byron Jones when he came out and said, yeah, dude, he's better. And I support him. And Xavien Howard said the same thing. They got each other's back because it's not a war between the fucking players. It's a war between Xavien Howard, the best player on the team, and the front office and / coaching staff, who doesn't want to even give him base respects for being the best player on the team and top 3 at the very least at this position in the fucking league. So anyway, but here, let's see what Jerome Baker has to say. We support him. He supports us. That's one thing you can never say about X. He's a great teammate. He's a great guy, and we all love him, so we're going to be good. Yeah, because it's not about that. Let's see. Quarterback Tua, moving on to the next thing. Quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who's had a very good first 8 days of camp, has had only one problem so far. At times, he holds the ball too long in the face of pressure. Which actually has historically been a little something of his, especially last year. But, you know, last year was a shit show in a lot of different ways. But, you know, it could very well be, you know, for what he's about to mention. I honestly don't really care about it that much. I'll only really care about it if it happens in games and he gets sacked because of it. So, you know, I'm just keeping it real. I don't really care about it right now. I've told you guys when it comes to this point in the season, I do not get emotionally invested. All of this is just contextual data that I will use when we get to the preseason games and then the regular season to evaluate the actual status of this roster and this team. But I've been reluctant to read much into that because you don't know how Tagovailoa will react in the same situation if he was facing an opposing defense that was about to devour him. Tagovailoa doesn't face that exact situation in practice because he isn't being tackled, which is completely fair, right? So that might be motivating him to hold onto the ball a bit longer than he should at times. All fair. Asked this week about not getting the ball out quickly enough at times, the 6'1" Tagovailoa said, and this is interesting, take it for what you will, I'm not as tall, so I got to get back and try to maneuver my way through the pocket to see where guys are going to be. But for me, it's really spots on the field. I say that's interesting because, look, he is a bit undersized, both in, you know, frame and height, but also because this offensive line, I mean, obviously we have to wait and see if they're going to be good or if they're going to be trash, but they're all pretty tall. I think they're all like 6'3" and above. So, you know, a smaller quarterback might have a little bit of difficulty seeing over such tall guys. It just adds another layer of, it just adds, you know, an additional layer of challenge to it for him. But moving on, so there are some positive news. There's some positive news today in the injury / COVID situation, really just the COVID situation, because the Dolphins made 6 roster moves Thursday, removing Preston Williams, receiver Preston Williams and tight ends Sathan Carter and Adam Shaheen from the COVID-19 list 5 days after being placed on the list. Tight end Mike Gesicki remained on the list. What's interesting about that, right, is because, some of the nuance in this conversation is that Godsey had to go home because he tested positive even though he was vaccinated. It would seem that Mike Gesicki, it is believed, although I haven't seen anywhere that it has been officially confirmed, but it is believed that Mike Gesicki has been vaccinated, in large part because he was talking to reporters without a mask, and you have to be vaccinated to do that per the protocols. So it was believed to be, but he's the one that's actually staying on the list the longest. So does that mean he tested positive for it too? Now, we likely won't get any, because they kind of keep that shit private. But did he test positive? Which would be interesting, because if that's the case, then that's likely two people, one coach, one player, who had been vaccinated who tested positive. Conversely, on the other hand, Adam Shaheen, it is believed to not have been vaccinated because he seems to be in the same line of thinking as Cole Beasley, but he's come off the list now. So did he test negative for it? Did Mike Gesicki? I don't know. It's just all curious and interesting to me. And look, it's gonna play a factor into the season. Hopefully it doesn't hit us hard. But I just have a feeling that COVID is going to be pretty influential over the course of the season, even though people seem to think that it's not going to, which I find to be absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, the Dolphins also released 3 tight ends who joined the team recently: Gabe Holmes, Saul Canella, and Khalif Jackson, which of course is no surprise. And as I had said before, those guys are going to get Ross Reynolds as soon as these other guys come off the list, because the only reason why they were brought in was because these guys had to be put on the COVID list. So, no surprise there. Durham Smythe and Hunter Long have received much of the first team work at tight end in recent practices. Carson Meyer and Chris Myarick are also on the roster. As for Williams, he remains on the physically unable to perform list as he works his way back from foot surgery last November, but at least he was able to come off the COVID list, so that is some progress for him. The team hasn't offered a timetable for his return. Michael Dieter, the first team center for all 7 practices so far, has impressed teammates. Okay, well, that's cool. I need to see what happens in games. He needs to impress me. Not that I'm anyone special, but for me and my evaluations, right, he needs to impress me. I obviously don't have any say one way or another whether he, plays or anything like that. But for me and my evaluations and what I put out to you guys in the world, he needs to impress me, because this offensive line to me is not impressive really at all. So, but he's not the only one, to be fair. They all need to. Mike is a good guy, a leader, a damn good football player, Hunt said. Physical, smart. Right now, the center is our offense. In our offense is a vocal point, a main centerpiece for us, and I think he's doing a fantastic job. Again, that remains to be seen. I'm trying to predict which undrafted rookies have the best chance to stick. You always start with the ones given the most guaranteed money after the draft. And for the Dolphins, 2 stand well above everyone else. Guard Robert Jones, given $130,000 guaranteed, and cornerback Terrell Williams, who is guaranteed $100,000 by the Dolphins after being claimed off waivers from the Saints. And Williams has impressed in the first week of camp, making a few good plays on the ball and forcing 2 fumbles after making an interception in mandatory minicamp. He has been beaten some too in the past week, but there's potential there. Williams was considered a 4th to 6th round talent before ankle injury at Syracuse. The Dolphins offered Williams more money than the Saints did immediately after the draft, but Williams opted for New Orleans partly because he thought he had a better chance to make the Saints. But he ended up with the Dolphins anyway because the Saints, after signing him, wanted him to sign a waiver regarding his surgically repaired ankle. New Orleans thought it would sneak him through the waivers and re-sign him, not expecting any team to claim him and inherit his $100,000 guarantee, but the Dolphins pounced. The 6'2" rookie had 4 interceptions in 28 college games and opted out after 5 games last season because he thought it wasn't advisable to continue playing with a torn ligament in his ankle. That ankle injury was affecting his hamstring and his ability to play to his level of expectation, his father told the Syracuse Post last fall. He had surgery in December. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to read through the rest of that. Honestly, it's just a little bit of, additional stuff that isn't really all that important. But there was a lot of good information in there, and even though I think that Barry Jackson has a little bit more of an optimistic approach than what is the reality, you know, particularly there when it comes to the offensive line and, you know, his thoughts on the Xavien Howard situation. But again, look, man, I'll say it a million times. I've said it a million times. I'll say it a million more. I hope I'm wrong on those things. I want Xavien Howard here, and I want that offensive line to do well. So, I hope, but until those things prove to be the case, I'm not going to say that they are, right? I'm not going to go ahead and say that this offensive line is going to be great when they need to prove it to me. I'm not going to say that Xavien Howard situation is all good and things are moving in the right direction until either there's confirmed reports that they have come to terms, or that they're imminently coming to terms, and Xavien Howard returns to the team in full capacity. So anyway, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. I hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I'm out. I'll see y'all soon. Phins up.